Welcome to this deep dive. Today we have a truly mind-bending mission for you.
We really do.
Yeah, we are going to completely dismantle everything you think you know about psychopaths.
Which is a lot. I mean, pop culture really does a number on us there.
Right. So we're pulling from Kevin Dutton's really fascinating book, The Wisdom of Psychopaths, and we're exploring the incredibly surprising, almost totally counterintuitive ways that psychopathic traits might actually be the secret to success in modern life.
Yeah, it completely flips the script.
It does. And to really set the stage for how different this perspective is, there's this incredible personal anecdote from the author about his own father.
I love this story.
It's so good. So his dad was a market trader in London, one of those charming, fast-talking, just utterly ruthless guys who, he just never lost his cool no matter what was happening.
Which honestly is the perfect environment for that kind of personality.
Mm-hmm.
High pressure, fast transactions, constantly reading the crowd.
Exactly. And one day, the author was a kid, and he was helping his dad sell a massive batch of date books to a crowd on the street. But there was a huge, seemingly insurmountable problem. The date books were completely defective.
Like fundamentally flawed.
Right. They only had 11 months printed in them. There was absolutely no January.
None at all.
Now, most people would panic, right? I mean, you'd throw them out or maybe try to quietly scam someone and run away.
Yeah, cut your losses.
Not his dad. He didn't even blink. He just stood up on his crate and pitched it to the crowd. He shouts, "Unique opportunity to get your hands on an 11-month diary, folks. Sign up for a special 2-for-1 offer today, and I'll throw in an extra month next year for absolutely free."
That is just brilliant. I mean, the sheer audacity of it.
And it worked. They sold the entire lot. He didn't look at a missing month as a defect that should cause anxiety. He instantly reframed it as a bizarre, irresistible selling point. He was completely unfazed.
And that story really is the perfect gateway into the paradigm shift we need to make today. Because when you hear the word psychopath, you almost certainly picture a monster.
Right. You picture someone lurking in an alleyway or, a cinematic serial killer.
Exactly. But Dutton proposes a completely different core metaphor. Psychopathy isn't an on-off switch. It's not a binary where you either are a psychopath or you're a normal person.
It's a spectrum.
Yes, but even more dynamic than that. I want you to imagine human personality as a massive studio mixing desk. We all have these different audio dials, fearlessness, focus, empathy, mental toughness, charm, impulsivity.
So we all have a little bit of these traits humming in the background.
Precisely. A violent serial killer is simply someone who has every single one of those dials cranked all the way up to maximum. And when you push every dial on a mixing desk into the red, you just get a distorted, destructive, deafening noise.
Exactly.
But, and this is the crux of the whole deep dive, a top-tier surgeon, a Fortune 500 CEO, or a pioneering astronaut might just have a few of those very specific dials, like focus and fearlessness, turned up significantly higher than the rest of us.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand that mixing desk and how those dials work, we have to look at what is physically happening inside the brain.
Right. The actual biology.
Yeah, and there is this incredibly chilling detail Dutton brings up involving Dr. Helen Morrison. She's a leading expert on serial killers, and she actually assisted in the autopsy of the notorious serial killer John Wayne Gacy.
A horrifying case.
Truly. But afterward, she literally drove home in her Buick with his brain in a glass jar sitting right there on the passenger seat.
Just a casual commute with one of the most infamous brains in history riding shotgun.
I know, right? She wanted to study it. She assumed she would find massive lesions, tumors, or some glaring anatomical anomalies that created such a monster. But the absolute shocker was that when the brain was tested and examined,
It was normal.
it looked completely, entirely normal. There were zero physical differences between his brain and yours or mine.
Which completely upends the old Victorian idea of finding the evil lobe in the brain. The reason Gacy's physical hardware looked normal is because the anomaly isn't in the hardware itself.
It's the software.
Exactly. It's about how that hardware functions when the lights are on and the electricity is flowing. Dutton highlights a really famous EEG study by Robert Hare. He is arguably the leading global authority on psychopaths.
Right.
So Hare hooked subjects up to EEG machines to measure their real-time brainwaves and had them do a lexical decision task.
So just flashing strings of letters on a screen and asking the person to press a button if it forms a real word.
Right, a very standard cognitive test. But the trick was in the words themselves. For normal people, the EEG showed that they reacted much faster, and with a totally different electrical signature to emotionally charged words.
Like cancer or death.
Yes, words like cancer, death, or rape, compared to neutral words like tree or chair. The normal brain lights up. It recognizes the heavy emotional weight. But for the psychopaths taking the test,
Nothing.
the brain waves were completely flatlined in comparison. They processed the horrific emotional words with the exact same electrical signature as the word tree.
Wow. So the actual meaning of the word doesn't carry any emotional baggage for them?
Hare described it perfectly. He said that for a psychopath, language is only word deep. There is no emotional contouring behind the syllables. So when a psychopath looks you in the eye and says, "I love you," or "I'm so sorry," it carries the exact same emotional weight to them as saying, "I think I'll have a cup of coffee."
That is wild, and that perfectly sets up the famous trolley problem, which Dutton uses to illustrate this massive empathy divide.
Oh, the classic ethical dilemma.
Yeah, the classic version. A runaway trolley is hurtling down a track toward 5 trapped people. You are standing next to a switch. If you flip it, the trolley diverts to a side track, but it will kill one person trapped over there.
The math makes sense.
Right. When presented with this impersonal dilemma, most people, psychopath or not, will flip the switch. 5 lives saved, 1 life lost.
But the personal dilemma is where the mixing desk really shows its settings.
Exactly. So the second scenario is the same runaway trolley, the same 5 trapped people, but this time you aren't at a switch. You are standing on a footbridge directly over the tracks, right behind a very large stranger.
You have to push them.
Yeah, the only physical way to stop the trolley and save the 5 people is to shove the stranger off the bridge onto the tracks below. The math is identical. Kill 1 to save 5. But most people physically recoil at the mere thought of pushing someone to their death with their bare hands.
And that visceral recoiling you're describing is what psychologists call hot empathy. It's messy, it's emotional, and it's deeply hardwired into us. When a normal person is placed in an fMRI scanner and asked to even just imagine pushing that man off the bridge, their amygdala, which is the emotion and fear center of the brain, lights up like a pinball machine.
Just going crazy.
Totally. It's an overwhelming, frantic emotional response telling them, "Stop, don't do this."
But the psychopath in the scanner.
Total darkness. When a psychopath is presented with that exact same gruesome personal dilemma, the neural casino in their amygdala is completely boarded up. They process the decision using what's called cold empathy.
Cold empathy.
Yeah, it's a steely, detached, emotionless calculus. They literally do not feel the heat of the situation. So they have absolutely no problem shoving the guy off the bridge because to them, the math is still just 5 is greater than 1.
Which is terrifying when you think about a serial killer. But Dutton argues that in very specific, high-stakes circumstances, that cold empathy is a superpower.
It absolutely can be.
I want you to imagine you are walking through customs at a busy international airport, and you actually have something illegal hidden in your bag. You're sweating, your heart is racing, you're trying to act natural. Dutton wanted to test how predatory instincts work in these situations, so he had students act as customs officers.
A fascinating setup.
Yeah, they watched 5 associates walk casually across a stage, knowing that one of them was secretly smuggling a red handkerchief. That was the only stakes. Just a handkerchief.
Low stakes, but still stressful.
Right. The students who scored low on psychopathic traits struggled. They only spotted the smuggler about 30% of the time, which is barely better than random guessing. But the students who scored high on the psychopathic trait spectrum, they successfully zeroed in on the smuggler over 70% of the time. They could literally see the vulnerability radiating off the person.
Which naturally brings up the question of how they are doing that. Are they just incredibly observant of micro-expressions? Or is it something deeper? Dutton points to research suggesting it might actually be a profound biological difference.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we are talking about the literal smell of fear. Dutton brings up this wild experiment by a cognitive neuroscientist named Liliane Wishuka-Parodi.
This study is just mind-blowing.
It is. She went out and collected the sweat of first-time skydivers right as they were in freefall, hurtling toward the earth in absolute terror. She also collected the sweat of people sitting in a dark room watching the terrifying horror movie Candyman.
Just bottling pure, unadulterated human panic.
Exactly. Then she brought volunteers into a lab and had them inhale these samples of fear sweat while playing a computerized gambling game. And the volunteers were completely unaware of what they were smelling. They just thought they were breathing normal air.
Right.
For the normal people, subconsciously smelling that fear was chemically contagious. It triggered their own anxiety, and it made them play the gambling game much more conservatively. They protected their bets.
But the psychopaths had a completely inverted reaction. When they subconsciously inhaled the fear sweat, their neurological immune system kicked in. They essentially have a zero-tolerance policy for anxiety.
So they didn't get scared.
Not at all. Instead of becoming cautious, they actually started taking significantly more risks when exposed to the fear pheromones. They were chemically impervious to the panic. It actually stimulated them.
Wow.
And this connects to real-world heroes. Dutton cites this incredible study by Stanley Rachman on decorated bomb disposal experts. These are elite operatives with over 10 years of experience who have been highly commended for their bravery in the field. Rachman measured their heart rates as they were actively approaching live, complex, explosive devices.
You would think their heart rates would be through the roof.
Any normal person's would be. But these experts, their heart rates didn't just stay stable. As they entered the danger zone, their heart rates actually dropped.
They dropped.
Yes, they entered a state of cold, meditative, absolute focus. It is the exact same Arctic neurology we see in the psychopaths, just channeled into saving lives. Dutton even compares it to Neil Armstrong during the Apollo 11 moon landing.
Oh, that's a great example.
Armstrong had to manually take over the controls and maneuver the lunar module over a completely unpredictable rocky landscape, with only 10 seconds of fuel left before they would crash. He executed a flawless touchdown, and the medical telemetry later showed his heart rate barely blipped. He might as well have been parallel parking a sedan at the local grocery store.
That is just awe-inspiring, but it really forces the question. If these traits, this cold focus, this fearlessness, are shared by pioneering astronauts, elite bomb disposal experts, and violent serial killers, what actually separates the boardroom or the spacecraft from the maximum security prison cell?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. And to figure that out, Dutton looks at the big 5 personality traits.
The ocean model.
Yes.
Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. This is the gold standard for personality psychology.
So how does a psychopath map onto those 5 dials?
Well, they score incredibly low on agreeableness, which means they can be ruthless, manipulative, and unconcerned with making people happy. And they score incredibly low on neuroticism, meaning they have almost zero natural anxiety or self-doubt.
Right.
But, and this is the key, they score very high on extroversion, high on openness to new experiences, and high on conscientiousness, specifically the subtrait of competence.
Which, when you blend all that together, creates an incredibly potent, dazzling, and utterly fearless personality profile. You have someone who is charming, driven, completely unbothered by stress, and willing to do whatever it takes to win.
A force of nature.
Exactly. And you look at the data Dutton pulled, and there's this fascinating analysis of U.S. presidents. The numbers show that leaders like John F. Kennedy, Bill Clinton, and the Roosevelts actually scored remarkably high on these exact psychopathic traits.
That always shocks people.
It does. And just to be clear for everyone listening, we are impartially reporting the data from the source here. We're taking absolutely no political sides. We are simply showing how these traits map onto high-achieving leaders. But it is wild to see that connection.
It is. And what differentiates those high-achieving historical leaders from the people locked up in prison is a specific dial on our mixing desk, the antisocial dial.
The antisocial dial.
Yes. Dysfunctional, criminal psychopaths have their dials for impulsivity, lack of long-term goals, and physical aggression turned all the way to maximum. They want immediate gratification, and they don't care who they have to hurt right now to get it. A successful psychopath, on the other hand, possesses the self-discipline to delay gratification.
So they can plan.
They have the exact same lack of fear, the exact same ruthless drive, but they have the behavioral control to play the long game.
But wait, so are we saying they literally don't feel emotion at all? Because that contradicts the idea of them being charming or understanding what people want.
It's not that they don't experience any emotion ever. It's more about how their brain filters it when they're on a mission. Researcher Joe Noman conducted a study using a variation of the Stroop task to prove this.
Oh, the Stroop task is the one where the word BLUE is printed in red ink, and you have to name the color. Right?
Exactly. Newman used a version with pictures and contradictory words. So he'd show a picture of a pig, but the word "see at" would be printed across it in massive letters. Normal people hesitate. Their brain gets jammed up trying to process the image and the conflicting words simultaneously.
So confusing.
But psychopaths, they sailed right through without a second of hesitation. Newman discovered that psychopaths have what you might call emotional tunnel vision.
Emotional tunnel vision?
Yes. If they are focused on a specific goal or reward, their brain completely screens out peripheral cues, especially emotional ones. They don't process the anxiety or the fear because their brain simply drops it from their radar in pursuit of the objective.
So, if you are playing a game against someone with that kind of intense, emotionless, laser-focused tunnel vision, how on earth do you win?
It's very difficult.
Dutton uses the analogy of playing the game of chicken, like that famous scene with Jim and Buzz in the classic movie Rebel Without a Cause. Two cars are speeding toward the edge of a cliff. If both drivers are sensible, they both swerve and it's a draw.
Right.
But if your opponent is a psychopath who is biologically incapable of feeling fear and absolutely refuses to swerve, they win. Every single time.
What's fascinating here is how this plays out in the complex mathematics of human survival. Dutton brings up the political scientist Robert Axelrod, who famously hosted a massive computer tournament to figure out the ultimate strategy for survival and social exchange using the prisoner's dilemma.
Where you have to choose to either cooperate with your partner or betray them for a bigger payout.
Exactly. And the winning program in this massive simulation was called TIT for TAT, designed by Anatole Rappaport. It won because it perfectly mirrored the most effective aspects of human nature.
How did it work?
Well, it always started by cooperating. If it was betrayed, it retaliated immediately. But then it forgave quickly and went right back to cooperating. However, its true secret weapon was its dark side.
Its psychopathic side.
Exactly. It wasn't squeamish. When the situation demanded it, TIT for TAT had the psychopathic capability to ruthlessly crush an opponent to ensure its own survival. It proved mathematically that unconditional naive cooperation is a losing strategy in the long run. You need that inner steel.
And that inner steel, that ability to drop the empathy and make the hard choice, is exactly what comes into play during life or death crises. Dutton illustrates this with two devastatingly contrasting stories that really stick with you. The first is from 2007. A 10-year-old boy named Jordan Lyon was drowning in a pond.
Tragic story.
Yeah, two police community support officers arrived on the scene, but instead of jumping in, they just stood at the edge of the water and watched him drown. Why? Because they later stated they weren't trained to deal with a water incident. They were totally paralyzed by their code of conduct and their fear of doing the wrong thing.
A complete failure of action due to systemic rules.
Exactly. Now, contrast that tragic paralysis with the story of the ship William Brown in 1841. The ship hit an iceberg in the Atlantic and sank. A longboat that was only meant to hold 7 people was crammed with over 30. A brutal storm was rolling in, the boat was taking on freezing water, and it was going to go under.
A literal life-or-death math problem.
Able seaman Alexander Holmes and the first mate looked at the situation and made a cold, brutal, psychopathic calculation. To save anyone at all, they had to lighten the load, so they ruthlessly threw 14 male passengers overboard to their deaths in the freezing ocean. The remaining passengers survived the storm, and Holmes was later tried for manslaughter.
It is a harrowing, deeply uncomfortable comparison. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it demonstrates the evolutionary necessity of the psychopath in our species. Society naturally falls into groupthink. We have a profound desire for consensus, for following the rules, and that often overrides realistic, independent action.
Like the officers at the pond.
Exactly. Those police officers watching the boy drown were trapped in groupthink. But a robust society actually needs a small percentage of individuals who are perfectly willing to step completely outside the safety of the group. Without those people, the ones who possess the cold empathy and the fearlessness to make the brutal, unthinkable decisions when the rules no longer apply, the entire lifeboat goes down.
So what does this all mean? It means we have to completely reframe how we view psychopathy. To borrow a brilliant analogy from Dutton, psychopathy is essentially like a top-of-the-range sports car.
I love this analogy.
Inherently, that powerful engine is neither good nor bad. You can use that incredible speed and handling to rush a pregnant woman to the hospital in record time and save 2 lives, or you can use it to recklessly drive someone off a cliff. It all comes down to the context, the skill, and the discipline of the driver. Which brings us back to you, listening to this right now. I want you to think about your own internal mixing desk. Are there areas in your life right now, maybe a highly tense negotiation you're facing, a sudden crisis at home, or a high-stakes stressful project at work, where consciously turning down your empathy dial and turning up your fearlessness dial might actually give you the exact edge you need to succeed?
And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about your day. We are living in an increasingly digital, disconnected world. We spend our days communicating through screens, isolated from the immediate physical consequences of our interactions.
That's true.
That environment naturally strips away our hot, face-to-face empathy. If you look at the trajectory of our modern corporate and social environment, it forces us to ask a really unsettling question. Are we accidentally terraforming our society into a place where these psychopathic traits, cold empathy, ruthless focus, and absolute fearlessness, are no longer just an occasional advantage, but the absolute baseline requirement for survival?
That is a chilling thought to end on, but definitely one we need to be paying attention to. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope it completely changed how you look at the world and maybe even how you look at your own mixing desk. Stay curious, and we'll catch you next time.